Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and we have what appears to be possibly a very, very exciting rumor. Of course, it's always possible, it could be nothing, but this might be something. We have two words mentioned by someone who might know something or might have heard something that could be leading to something very, very huge. A Zelda Remake. Could it be happening? Is an announcement about to happen? Perhaps at the Game Awards? Are we hyping up something that may not have anything? Possibly, but also, there is reason to think that something like this could happen very soon. So strap in everyone, we have a lot to talk about today when it comes to this possibility of a big Zelda remake for Nintendo Switch 2 getting announced relatively soon. Do you find yourself feeling tired, unable to take a good nap during the day from wherever you may be? Then perhaps you are in need of a soft, comfortable sleep mask that blocks out all light. Fortunately, Meant to Sleep, the sponsor for today's video, has just that, a quality sleep mask. This sleep mask has super soft, comfy cushions that cover your eyes and block out all light. It's easy to adjust to different sizes, and it feels great to wear, and it's helped me personally fit in just a bit more rest during my days. So if you're looking to improve your sleep and energy, check out the Meant to Sleep mask using the link in the description below with my code SLEEPRESTART. So the inciting incident for today's video is this tweet that came out from Nintendo. Nintendo last night tweeted a Zelda remake. Nothing more, no context, nothing else said. Not him coming out later saying, oh, I was joking or anything like that. That's it. That's the tweet. Zelda Remake. Now, most seem to think the manner in which this has been framed appears to be a tease of some kind. It seems like Nintendo has heard something. And it would not put it past Nintendo to hear something. Nintendo, what they do is report on deals about Nintendo. And at least to my recollection, there's not really much history of them being a jokester or a troll or a liar or an engagement baiter or anything like that. This isn't like a beat-em-up scenario where beat-em-ups has a history of doing wild jokes and then going back on them saying, oh, sorry, I lied or I was joking a few weeks later. At the same time, though, Nintendo isn't specifically stating what this is. There is ambiguity here. And maybe this is not actually a rumor, but my personal take is that the way this is being framed, I do kind of think that they're putting it out there that a Zelda remake could be happening really soon. And the Game Awards is later this week, and there's a lot of conversation about, is Nintendo finally going to have a big presence at the Game Awards? The last few years, their presence has been pretty weak. And they have had a history where they do have a pretty strong presence, but like I said, over the last few years, it's been pretty weak, so many people are very skeptical, myself included, that Nintendo's going to do much at the show. However, as I've also talked about before, this time around might be a little different because this is the launch year for the Nintendo Switch 2. And when we think back to when the Switch 1 came out, that was when Nintendo was most active at the Game Awards. During those first few years of Switch, we had big announcements surrounding Breath of the Wild. Then in the years to follow, we had Smash Bros. Announcements, so those are pretty big announcements in those starting years for Switch. Maybe Nintendo might go back to doing something more major at the show now that Switch 2 has come out. Now, this Sunday I already put out my overall thoughts on the Game Awards situation. There was another rumor about there maybe being some sort of big announcement at the show from Nintendo. And my overall take on the situation is that the most likely scenario is us getting a Mario Galaxy movie teaser. They've done that before with the Mario movie. I think it makes a lot of sense. The Mario movie is about to come out. It reaches a wide audience. I think that's the most likely thing that would come from Nintendo during the show. Now, some other things to point out, though. Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave is a relatively big game coming out next year. It's already been announced. So like most of the other announcements we've seen at the Game Awards from Nintendo, it's usually updates on things we already know about, and we have seen Fire Emblem stuff at the show before, so I wouldn't be totally shocked if we get an update on Fortune's Weave at the show. I'm not saying it's extremely likely, but I feel like of all the options here, it's relatively up there. And then another possibility that I didn't speak too much on Sunday, I just mentioned the possibility of some sort of partner project, is maybe us finally seeing an update on the Dustbloods. It's a huge game, a From Software game exclusive for Switch 2 coming out next year. There was a rumor out there suggesting that we could get Dustbloods info relatively soon. We talked about this about a week or so ago. So that relatively soon would probably be at the Game Awards. And given that this is a third-party thing, not Nintendo, but still a huge third-party project, a partner project for the Switch 2, this could be maybe the most exciting Nintendo news we get at the show. However, now with Nintendo putting this out there, I gotta entertain the idea. I gotta think maybe there's a possibility Nintendo comes out swinging, and they do have a huge announcement at the Game Awards. Now, if you've been following me for a while, you probably already know what I'm thinking. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time Remake. I feel like the evidence has been continually piling up for this game to be in the works, an ambitious reworking of the game, not just what they did for Ocarina of Time 3D, which was already a very long time ago. That came out back in 2011, which was about 13 years after the release for the original release on N64, 1998, and we're talking about this in late 2025. It has been more than 14 years since Ocarina of Time 3D, an even longer amount of time than the gap between the original and the 3DS release. And with the movie coming out in the first half of 2027 and Zelda's 40th anniversary being next year, and this being the beginning of the Switch 2 era, and Nintendo needing something pretty significant in Zelda to start the generation, bring on that Zelda fanbase early on, and with Tears of the Kingdom having just come out a couple years ago, a whole new 3D Zelda is unlikely, but an ambitious remake might be the happy middle ground here. And we've been seeing signs. We talked about how the Zelda series producer Eiji Aonuma in 2 different interviews has hinted at this, and there's a history of him hinting at future Zelda projects. He's confirmed this himself. We have a lot of evidence of this. We've talked about it before. And there's even been some other interesting things, such as the Zelda Lego sets. There was the interesting choice to bring back the Ocarina of Time Deku Tree, and now we've had it confirmed that next year we are getting an Ocarina of Time dedicated Lego set. So it does seem like more and more signs are piling up. There's even more I could argue, but the point is, there's a lot of evidence. There are also rumors, like from Nash Weedle, that it's been in the works. So it would make a lot of sense to announce something like this next year. I think Nintendo's going to need something big next year alongside Pokemon to really captivate fans. So if Nintendo wants to announce an ambitious Ocarina of Time Zelda remake, tease it at the Game Awards show, I mean, I'm not going to complain. I'm going to freak out. That's going to be amazing. That would be an incredible thing to do. Do I think it's likely? It seems like something Nintendo would not do. I want to reiterate that all the announcements we've seen at the Game Awards from Nintendo have been announcements of games we already knew about. This would be an announcement of the actual game, not just a update to the game, something we didn't know about, or another look or another teaser. So this would be on another level. Now, it's not to say nothing new has been announced at the Game Awards before. Plenty of new things have been announced at the Game Awards before, just outside of Nintendo, and there have been partner projects that have been announced at the Game Awards before that are for Nintendo. So there's some minor precedent, but not directly from Nintendo themselves to announce something totally new there. Normally, they like to say something like this for a Nintendo Direct. So I am skeptical that this Zelda remake, if it is indeed happening, which I do believe it absolutely is happening in my opinion, I don't know if it will be happening here. I think it could be something saved for something next year, like maybe in a Nintendo Direct. And maybe Nintendo isn't necessarily hinting at this announcement to be at the award show. All they said was a Zelda remake. Maybe they finally got word that a Zelda remake is happening for the 40th anniversary, and so they're excited about it, and so they put out a tweet, and that's it. It's gonna happen, maybe, but not necessarily for the Game Awards. And I think that's something interesting to consider here when we consider the ambiguity of the tweet. We don't know what it ultimately means, what it's ultimately getting at. It's not even necessarily an Ocarina of Time remake. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that project's going to take even longer. That is certainly possible. I have not even been assuming that the Ocarina of Time remake is going to come out next year. I think that's a possibility that seems to make a lot of sense, and a lot of things seem to be matching up with that. but at the same time, maybe Nintendo wants to focus on the movie first, and then afterwards, once they have a lot of people paying attention to Zelda after the 40th anniversary stuff, and then the movie, then they're like, hey, now that you're paying attention to Zelda, like to the masses, they put out this game that reaches a large audience. Not too different from how Nintendo handled Mario Wonder. They had a variety of Mario things, then the Mario movie, Mario sales picked up overall, then a few months after the movie came out, they announced Mario Wonder, which came out a few months later, and that did pretty well. So Nintendo could be taking that approach, and that would mean the game wouldn't come out till the end of 2027, all assuming this is even happening. And so under the assumption that it is happening, again, I do believe it is happening, it's just a question of when, not if, it's also possible that maybe there's something else smaller being announced at the awards show having to do with Zelda. Maybe it's finally Wind Waker HD, or Twilight Princess HD, or a 2D Zelda remake. These are all possibilities that could maybe happen instead. Do I think any of those are totally fitting for the Game Awards show? I mean, anything Zelda would be exciting, but it definitely wouldn't be along the lines of what we've come to expect from big Game Awards announcements. There is something about this idea, though, of a Zelda remake, an ambitious one, be it for Ocarina of Time or maybe something else like Twilight Princess or what have you, like a remake, not just Twilight Princess HD from Wii U, but something ambitious is my main point here. If Nintendo were to announce something like this at the award show this year, before 2025 closes out, something about that would make a decent amount of sense to me, and it would take me back to what I've talked about from the September Nintendo Direct, which, by the way, a lot of people didn't like what I said, but I do think it holds some weight here. And that's that Nintendo Direct was good. Under most circumstances, that kind of lineup would be considered great for a Nintendo Direct, but I felt like it was only okay considering the circumstances, and that is that we're in the launch year of Switch 2, and Nintendo should not only be announcing things about what's to come this year and next year, but something big for next year to get people really eager for the future of the console, so they're more likely to pick up the console. This is usually how it goes. So Nintendo not having a big hitter like that really excites a lot of the core audience to pick up a Switch 2 immediately, it definitely left me thinking that Direct wasn't the best possible. Not a bad Direct, again, but not the best Direct they could have done. But if they were saving an announcement like that for maybe the Game Awards, then all of a sudden it makes a little bit more sense because you still get an announcement like that out before the end of the year, and it reaches a very large audience, perhaps even larger than what it would have if it was in the Nintendo Direct, and also by doing so, you are granting more spotlight to other games that were there, and allowing the games that were to come out throughout these holidays to be a big part of the conversation. For example, Metroid Prime 4. Just came out. I'm working on my review. It will be coming out really soon. But there's been so much conversation about Metroid Prime 4 over the last few weeks. If there was a Zelda remake announced beforehand, that conversation likely would have been subdued a little bit. And the same goes for Pokemon Legends ZA, Kirby Air Riders, Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, especially because that is a Zelda spin-off. But now that all these games are out, maybe making an announcement like that, if they do have an announcement like that to make, would actually make a lot of sense. But as much as I really want to speak this into an existence, I just want to more so harp on the fact that this is not my expectation. I definitely think there's probably something to this tweet regarding Nintendo, but we don't know exactly what that is, so let's try to keep an open mind. And of course, there is always a possibility that what Nintendo is getting at here may not be anything at all. I do think it's something, but that something is still not totally clear. So again, let's keep an open mind, let's temper our expectations a little bit. The Game Awards, we've fallen for this before, many times, where we're like, hey, well, there is a history, there's actually a pretty significant history of there being announcements, just maybe not the announcements we're hoping it's going to be. So again, I go back to what I said earlier. If we're lucky, a teaser for the Mario Galaxy movie. If we're really lucky, an update on the Duskbloods or maybe Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave. I think those are like the best case scenarios. If we get an announcement of an Ocarina of Time remake, that is beyond best case scenario. That is an otherworldly masterclass announcement for the Game Awards, which I really don't think we should be believing in because there's not much history behind it. As I talked about, there are reasons why it would make a lot of sense, but Nintendo has never made a big brand new announcement on their own personal first-party IP at the awards show, so this would be unprecedented. That said, for fun, continuing to entertain this idea, which is the basic point for this entire video, if this is to happen, what would this announcement entail? Well, reminder that the awards show has a whole bunch of announcements happening in quick succession. Game announcements, commercials, nominations, awards given, people talking briefly, there's all of that stuff. So when an announcement does happen, the amount of time it's going to be on there is going to be very quick. So this would have to be a short teaser. And if it is a remake, how much do you really want to show off? So I would say, I feel like remake or not, they probably wouldn't want to show off too much at the award show, but just enough so we know what's happening. And so I could see maybe one scene, one iconic scene that they show that's maybe 10 to 15 seconds, perhaps even less, but it's enough to tell the world, oh, this is happening, and it would be in the visual style, so we can see how it looks, and I imagine it would look incredible. Something like that I think would go over really well, because one, it would showcase some impressive visuals for Switch 2, which, given that it's a next generation console or a new console, that's a big selling point, and the fact that it's Zelda, that's another big selling point, and entering Zelda's 40th anniversary, well, it would be fitting to do something like this. Will it happen? Again, very skeptical of it, but that does not mean I don't think a Zelda remake is not in the works and coming very soon, and yeah, I do think it's most likely Ocarina of Time remake, but we shall see. What do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget, you can use my code SLEEPRESTART when checking the link in the description below for the Manta Sleep Mask. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.